New York City is an epic place, and much like London with its Elizabeth line, it's getting a new transport megaproject in December 2022. Grand Central Madison, formerly known as East Side Access. This project has been a massive, multi-decade affair, like many in New York, and it's appropriately scaled for a city of New York's gigantic proportions. But what is it, how does it work, and how will it change the way people get around the New York City region? Let's take a look. So what's the point of Grand Central Madison? Well, right now, New York City, Manhattan specifically, has two main mainline rail stations, Penn Station and Grand Central Terminal. And these are fed by three major commuter railways, New Jersey Transit, Metro-North Railroad, and the Long Island Railroad. New Jersey Transit, who runs trains into Penn Station from the west, the Long Island Railroad, who runs trains into Penn Station from the east, and Metro-North Railroad, who runs trains into Grand Central from the north. Indeed, despite its grand title and reputation, Grand Central only currently serves mainline trains from Metro-North, and Amtrak intercity trains don't regularly serve it. Now this is a problem for obvious reasons. If you want to take a trip from Long Island to the north, you have to take a subway train in the middle, and the same is true if you want to travel from New Jersey to the north for what it's worth. This is very inconvenient, uses up capacity on the subway, and is just generally crappy, because you have to make two transfers in one of the densest city centers in the world. At the same time, though this is changing to some extent with major developments like Hudson Yards not so far from Penn Station, Grand Central Terminal on the east side of Midtown Manhattan is still where most of the jobs are and where people are traveling. So getting more transit riders directly there is a key priority. This is exactly what Grand Central Madison, the new name for the project formerly known as East Side Access, is meant to solve. As part of the project, which first started serious construction back in 2007, a massive new station has been built under Madison Avenue just west of Grand Central Terminal in Midtown Manhattan. And at around 40 meters deep, it's similar to the deepest parts of Crossrail, which given its location surrounded by some of the tallest skyscrapers in the world is actually shallower than I envisioned. The station, or substation more realistically, is composed of two gigantic caverns, and each cavern has been filled with two levels of tracks, with two stacked island platforms. These platforms sandwich a central mezzanine level, and that's linked into a separate Long Island Railroad concourse and the rest of Grand Central Terminal by a whole lot of escalators. And tracks don't simply stop at the station. There are actually tail tracks that extend several blocks to the south. Actually leaving Grand Central, the tracks on both levels have crossovers before ramping onto the same level and merging to enter the 63rd Street Tunnel under the East River. Now, like a lot of projects in New York, that tunnel under the East River was actually built decades ago. It actually has two levels, so yes, it's a double-deck tunnel, and the upper level carries the F train with a station at Roosevelt Island. The tight, roughly subway-sized profile of these tunnels will mean that only single-deck EMUs that the Long Island Railroad uses will be able to serve Grand Central, so the double-deck locomotive-hauled trains that you see today will continue to go to Penn Station. Continuing east into Queens, the tunnel split into four. Three exit into the Sunnyside Yard area, east of the portals for the East River Tunnel, before continuing east and connecting up to various tracks heading out onto the Long Island Railroad network. Well, the last one wraps around the existing yards and connects to a new yard built specifically for the Long Island Railroad west of the existing New Jersey Transit and Amtrak yard. This facility is meant for storing Long Island Railroad trains, so they can be parked after the morning rush and supplied to the new station at Grand Central Terminal during the afternoon rush. The impact of all of this is that the Long Island Railroad can now run into Grand Central. And this will mean for many riders that direct service will now be available from their home station to their destination on the east side. As a result of this, the railroad has said that roughly half of its service will now run to Grand Central, since that's where the demand is. The benefits are also not just for Grand Central passengers. The freed up capacity in the East River tunnels will enable a new project called Penn Access that will also add 4 new stations for Metro-North to serve in the Bronx, and enable Metro-North trains to actually run into Penn Station, which they currently don't. This will massively speed up trip times from the Bronx to the west side of Manhattan, but also create new connection options. And that will mean that trips between the 3 regional railways will be much more convenient. East-west, east-north, and west-north trips will all be able to be made with an in-station transfer, not forcing you to take the subway through Manhattan in the middle. This will likely also mean faster connecting service from the east side of Manhattan to New York's airports, since people will now easily be able to take the Long Island Railroad. Now, the project is super impressive, but it's far from perfect, and far too much of the media coverage of this project hasn't acknowledged that, besides the cost overruns and delays. For one, East Side access does not involve through running, which I talk a lot about on this channel, and which would see trains running into and beyond Manhattan rather than stopping and turning around there. For one, through running would mean that the station at Grand Central could be far smaller and wouldn't require so many tracks and these giant caverns. Thameslink in London uses very similarly large trains to the Long Island Railroad, with a sort of similar seating arrangement as well. And it's able to run 24 trains per hour through central London using relatively small stations and just 2 tracks. And it even uses different power systems on both sides of the city center, like some services in New York might. It's easy to imagine a version of Grand Central Madison that just had 2 tracks, with giant Spanish solution platforms on either side that would take up less space while still providing more capacity than East Side access, and with enough budget left over to potentially create a connection from the tail tracks over to Penn Station and the Hudson River tunnels, allowing trains to travel from New Jersey all the way to Long Island. It would also mean that tons of room wouldn't need to be used up in Queens, which has lots of valuable real estate, Long Island City is booming, to store trains during the midday. Basically, this is all just a very commuter-focused operation, which probably wasn't wise before COVID and definitely isn't wise after it. The service pattern is also arguably an issue. Currently, the Long Island Railroad has 2 main western termini, Penn Station and Atlantic Terminal in Brooklyn, which, as with Queens, has been growing a lot in recent years. Because of Grand Central Madison, both Penn Station and the Atlantic Terminal will see service reductions. And with the new proposed schedule, Brooklyn will only see 3 trains per hour, despite having a double-tracked rail line to Atlantic Terminal. Not only are these 3 trains per hour not very well coordinated with other trains further east on Long Island, but 2 of them will simply stop at the outskirts of New York City at Jamaica and force passengers to do an up and over, not even cross-platform transfer to other Long Island Railroad services, which again are not scheduled in coordination. That the 2-track line to Brooklyn can't even get 4 trains per hour is crazy, and this is something that definitely needs to be and can be rectified in the future. Now, while the project doesn't offer through running, which the agencies will argue that they actually do because they park trains on the opposite sides of Penn Station, New Jersey Transit on the east side at Sunnyside Yard, and Long Island Railroad at the west side at the West Side Yards, now covered by Hudson Yards. But what it does at least offer is a much more convenient transfer for passengers making cross-regional trips. Of course, having to make a transfer isn't ideal, but Grand Central and yes, even Penn Station, though it is being upgraded, are not the worst places in the world to make one. You can get some food, probably find a seat, though harder than it should be, and wait for your next train. At the same time, the new Madison Avenue portion of Grand Central should set the standard for new mainline stations in North America, with wide, large, airy platforms and level boarding. There will also be a major service expansion, and more trains to one of the densest business districts in the world is always going to be a good thing. But probably for me, the most exciting part of Grand Central Madison opening is that it's finally going to give us permission to focus on other things. While this project is positive, it's been in the works for 15 years now, and that's an amount of time that probably isn't equivalent to the amount of benefit that this project will actually bring. There needs to be more oxygen in the room for New York to focus on other incredibly important projects, such as the Interborough Express, Queenslink, finally getting the 2nd Avenue subway actually done, and better rail connections to the airports, among many other things. So, while it's not perfect, I am really excited about Grand Central Madison, and I hope you enjoyed the trains. Thanks for watching.